Today, we're looking at the question that is on everyone's mind. Should I stay or should I go? How do you get to the point of understanding, do I need a divorce? Is that the option? And for those of you who are worried about how difficult it will become to work with your soon to be ex, we're going to get into that too. Some of the control, some of the ways that you can overcome that, and overall, how you can regain your power in this process. So let's get started. Welcome to the Crazy Ex-Wives Club, a podcast dedicated to helping women navigate the emotional journey that is divorce. I'm your host, Erica, and if you're trying to figure out life after the big D, welcome to the club. Whether you're contemplating divorce or dealing with the aftermath or any of the many phases in between, the club has got you covered. Each week, you'll hear stories from women who have been in your shoes. This isn't about spilling tea on divorce details. This is about giving you the tools to take control of your own healing journey. Listen in weekly for advice, tips, and tools to help you move through each stage of the process. Welcome back to another episode of the Crazy Ex-Wives Club. I'm your host, Erica, and today's guest, Lois Liberman, is a New York matrimony attorney at Blank Rome with over 30 years of experience. She has a ton of experience of guiding people through this whole crazy process that is divorce. And so, Lois, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Thanks so much for having me, Erica. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. When we first started chatting, you guys had reached out. We looked at what was our topic that we really wanted to talk about. And obviously we want to talk about coercive control because that is a big topic that comes up a lot. But before we can even get there, within this 30 years, you've helped a lot of couples either navigate into divorce or maybe even some navigate out of it. How does somebody really know if divorce is the next option they need to be looking at?
Well, I think what's super important is that there's the ones that it's like a black and white, right? If there's somebody in a relationship where their physical or mental well-being is being challenged or is being hurt in some fashion, that's a no-brainer, right? If there is a situation where their children are being placed in an inappropriate situation or perhaps dangerous either to their emotional or physical well-being, those are no-brainers, right? Although those come with their own challenges because so often spouses can't see their way out because either they financially don't have the wherewithal to do so, or I think the adage is, or the statistics say, it takes 7 times for someone who's in a domestic violence situation, right, to be able to get themselves out. So
Yeah.
those I think are the black and white no-brainers. It's the pretty much the other stuff, like, is what's going on in our relationship really detrimental, or is it, my tolerance level has worn thin? I always talk about people when you got married, people are like onions. Over time, the layers will be worn away. And either sometimes that's from time or sometimes it's from crises or from illness or whatever. And the person, that onion you originally married, may not be the onion you're currently married to. And the question is that person the one that you want to wake up to and spend your life with? Life is short. And I think that from the standpoint of people making the really, I think it's a very serious decision about do I stay or do I go, that people need to take they need to take the time, and they really need not to make that decision in a knee-jerk reaction. When people come to see me in an initial consultation, I always tell them, I'm going to be here. It's not, you just because you came today doesn't mean you had to make that decision. You really do need to be thoughtful and think about, what is it that you're looking to escape and what is it that you're looking to, embrace in the next chapter, so to speak. No matter what, when even timing, let's assume somebody comes to see me and the decision has been made, I want to make that leap or I need to get out. I still very often will tell them, because knowledge is power, to look for information before they make any major step, either announcing to their spouse or hiring somebody to announce to their spouse. I ask them, you need to understand what your expenses are. You need to try to figure out what your assets are. Very often, as we know, and when we talk about coercive control, let's talk about the usual marriage of the man being the more moneyed spouse. Very often, they don't want to share information, right? Wife is on a very short leash. She either has a credit card, she has a joint account that has a certain amount of money, or she's just given weekly monies to pay for the housekeeper and certain things, and that's the leash she's on. She has no idea what their assets are, so to speak. So very often I tell people, especially if their spouse is either about to go on a trip or they're talking about their estate planning, they to ask them, what do we really have? God forbid you die tomorrow. I have no idea how I'm going to take care of our kids and how to take care of the home. I need the information. Sometimes coming at it from that standpoint will kind of allow the more controlling spouse to give that information.
There's so many points in there. Let's
I know. So go
recap.
ahead, start.
So I was like,
No,
hold
stop.
on. Like nugget after nugget after nugget. Divorce is not a quick fix. You are not running away from something. You are making a conscious choice that you are about to rewire, tear down, reset, redo every single system in your life.
Correct.
Your money systems, your support systems, you're probably selling the house, you're probably moving. This concept that like, oh, I'm just so done with him and he's so annoying and like,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna go, the grass is greener on the other side.
Always.
You got to get through a big old like ravine before you ever get to the grass on the other side. And we don't say that to scare you, but we say it to like, if I could help you save your marriage, I'd rather help you save your marriage than help you navigate what it means to be divorced. And we change, we grow, we evolve, we grow apart unless we are consciously making choices to return to that relationship. And then resentment builds and hurt builds, and it takes work to move through these things. The other thing I want to highlight is it takes two. If you're sitting in a place where you're like, I'm really unhappy in my marriage, I am going to pull the Band-Aid off and say, part of it is also you. Part of it was me. There was a lot of pieces that I was unhappy with that I was leaning into being more unhappy with instead of taking some ownership and taking some control and moving through what can I impact and what can I not. And so I think we have gotten to a place in society where, especially I see it a lot on social media because when one of the reels goes viral, everybody shows up to talk about like, how dare you throw in your marriage? You're such a quitter. Enjoy your cats. You're never going to find somebody again. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of pain. I mean, some of them are funny, but some of them are downright cruel. And it's coming from a place of pain. Somebody else, 99% of the time, these men are showing up because somebody hurt them. Somebody quit. Somebody walked out. Somebody got blindsided and they had no idea. And so being able to take the time up front, what's my emotional wounds that I need to heal? Where are my resentments? Where are my frustrations? Where are the things where we're just no longer aligned? Do we want the same kind of household, the same kind of family, the same future? And then really getting clear on like the finance part. Nothing has to happen instantly. You do have to be well educated. So do you know what investments you have? Do you know what ideas you'd have? If you're not working right now, what would you go do for a job? And again, empowerment, if you're moving through a divorce too, the other thing I'd love to see happen more often is women not just trying to get the man's money. Even if you're legally like have a right to it, like my goal, we're just going to eventually the child support payment that comes in is going directly into my son's college fund. I don't want to touch it. It's not an energetic thing that I need from my ex, right? And I know that that's not a thing everybody has the ability to do,
Right.
but how much more freeing is it? You've got to know your money. You've got to know where the pieces are coming from and take your own action.
That's a very interesting, to a certain extent, you're pretty much, preaching to the non-moneyed spouse to take charge financially of their own existence and not have to be reliant, right? But
Yeah.
let me reframe a bit, is that so often, even though we have come a very long way in women's rights and who goes to work and so on and so forth, the idea is that the marital estate has been created by both of you, notwithstanding that one of you may very well have earned more all the time. And so I still find it surprising when very often the more money spouse will be, well, it's my money, right? I earned it, it's my money. And even to the extent that resentment of the child support payments of going to the other spouse versus helping the child per se, it's because that has it's all couched in the anger and resentment. So I totally get the ideas. Well, if you just pay or put in the college fund or put in the account for him or for our son for later on, I get it. But very often there's, the child support payment is a necessity. And at least in New York, no matter what on the thresholds, when you're talking about multi-million dollar earners, the amount of money that the non-money spouse is getting for child support is just a pittance to the extent of what they used to live on, right? So that money is really, still extremely important.
I love that point too. Like I'm on the side where let's not take advantage of somebody else. Let's
No,
do
no,
what's
no.
fair.
But you know what? I think it's
Let
the reframing of the issue of advantage. You are not wrong in the sense of it's what their goal is so much of it is vengeful, right? It's about hurting and punishing. An idea of like just going after I'm just trying to take his money. I'm just trying to reframe it as that what was created during the marriage, unless you have a prenup, and just so you know, we do tons of prenuptial agreements, which basically is a contract that sets forth the path of in the event of death and divorce. So, you already have clarity ahead of time. But if you don't have that, the money that was created and the wealth that was created during the course of the marriage is both of yours. You know what I mean? It's not just the one person who went to work every day, because let's just be more traditional. The mom who stayed home or gave up her career to raise those kids, believe you me, she's doing as much, if not more, than the guy that's going out from 9 to 5 and then taking out his colleagues or his business associates to do more business and network and then gets home at 9, so to speak.
100%. Even for women who are not working outside of the home, it is still a full-time job. Like
For
running
sure.
a home, running kids, running sports, like it is for real. And so yes, I
No,
love
no, no.
your
And even the ones who do work, 9 times out of 10, they're doing also all the other stuff that goes with, right? It's the doctor's appointments and the laundry and making sure there's groceries. And even if you have childcare, it's still, they're doing like, 9% of the work, but we digress.
That was definitely me. I mean, it still kind of is me. There is just a traditional aspect of where the kid thing comes from. We could go down a whole thing of blended families, but let's not go there yet. Let's move into talking about the fear of control. So when you're sitting on that question of, I think divorce, you get to the point where you realize divorce really is the next option. We're
Yep.
not aligned. We don't want the same things. You're getting clear on where the finances are, what it's really going to look like. But what comes next is the biggest fear about how difficult your soon to be ex is going to make it. How
Right.
much are they going to control? How much are they just going to drag you through the courts for a lot of years? How much is it going to cost you emotionally and monetarily as you're
Right.
dealing with court systems and lawyers and all of that stuff?
Sure. Well, look, I'm never going to sugarcoat it. Like, it's going to be super easy. If you got this lawyer and that lawyer and this judge, it's going to go great because there are a lot of different variables. But for the most part, the obstacles that you're going to have to hurdle over should not be, a prohibition of saying, like, I just can't do it. It's just not worth it. Because at the end of the day, if you have the right lawyers and you are in a system where they don't allow things to drag on for years. And for the most part, unless it's a complex case or there really has been such a turnover of judges, it should be done within 6 months to a year. The standards of goals, at least in New York, for the judges, they have to, if it's a non-complex case, they have to get it over with within 6 months. And then sometimes there's other instances that they're supposed to be done by the year. Again, depending on the court system where they refer it out to a referee, that could take more time. But nothing should ever be so scary that you can't do it or you shouldn't do it. The reality here is that the fear factor is usually greater than the reality, and that is because most people, especially in situations where you do have a dynamic where there is mental abuse or, verbal abuse, or this idea of the coercive control, which comes at, when somebody is isolated, they've been isolated from their family, they've been isolated from their friends, they are kept on a very short leash and really don't have the financial wherewithal. All of this can be incredibly scary and daunting. But my belief, and after all my experience, is that the reality is usually far easier than what the fear factor was. And very often, especially when you're dealing with bullies or people who are that controlling, when you have somebody else who steps in front, like a lawyer, a strong lawyer, or a strong advocate, or a judge who's going to intervene, they don't have that same ability to control or to hurt the other spouse that they used to. And to a certain extent, the client or the individual is really safer within that, the parameters and the guardrails that have been set up through that court system.
So what can somebody do if they are experiencing that level of control or experiencing that level of fear? On my side, a lot of times fear is just, it's not real and we've got to
Yeah,
keep moving through it. But there are also things that you need to do, boundaries you need to set, ways that you want to be protecting yourself and being smart about what you're doing. Because again, this was a person you loved. This was a person that you were giving everything to. And so it's such a natural pattern for us to then be like, oh, okay, I'll give more again, or I'll bend in more again.
right.
And then comes that sharp reaction from them that cuts so deeply. If you've been struggling to find the right support to help you figure out what your next step is, the club is your answer. Launching this summer, we'll be hosting a private divorce group for you to get the support, the inspiration, and the guidance you need to be able to find the answers for you to finally move forward. No matter if you are unhappily married, trying to figure out what those next steps are, or in those early phases of separation and divorce where it feels like a constant uphill battle and you just want to get your feet underneath you, the club is going to be your place. Every single month, I offer support calls, networking calls to meet other women, and a signature program to guide you from confusion to clarity. On top of that, my most favorite part is every quarter, I'm going to send you a healing gift. You get a kit full of tools, support items, things to help you on your healing journey. The club is going to open up this summer, so make sure to get on the wait list. The link is in the show notes so that you have early access.
Well, ensuring that you have a support network, I think, is key, right? So, in the event that you are an individual that doesn't have access initially to funds or, knowledge or what have you, being able to have a support network around you, either, families or friends who sometimes, lawyers don't do this for free and they can make applications for fees and for retain, monies to be paid for them to work. But very often initially they need the retainer. So either somebody, puts it on a credit card, presuming that is they're ultimately going to get the money, or they have people who are going to help them, like that will make a loan or so. Just like when we're talking about like kind of mechanics of it all, and especially those individuals who've been kind of isolated from their family and friends, that can be a really daunting request. Like, will you be there for me, or can you help? Can I borrow X or Y? I promise I'll pay you back because I have multiples of that I'm going to get, kind of thing. But sometimes that's required. Ensuring that you have just support network around you with respect to family, friends, and even a therapist to get you through the process. Because no matter how fabulous a divorce attorney is, and I put myself included because I'm, all the different shapes and sizes of divorce lawyers, I'm very often the empath or the therapist. We're way too expensive to provide you with therapy. You need to find somebody, a mental health professional, to help you through it, because don't use your lawyer for that. It's just wait, unless you have multiple, millions of dollars, that it just doesn't matter because we're just too damn expensive. And then just sometimes finding a community, right? I know you're going to you have the club. There are so many different, avenues and paths where you can find a community of people who have been through it already before. I started something called, the Look Ahead with Lois Liberman salons, because I wanted to provide resources to either current clients or even to show past clients that have gone through it and have like come out on the other side thriving. Just making sure, just feeling like you are not alone can empower you tremendously. So from that standpoint of all those kind of like support network people or entities to be able to be there for you, that's kind of like the beginning that'll put you in the strongest position to be able to really move forward. And obviously finding a divorce lawyer that you click with, right? That's aligned with you and aligned with your goals and principles. You don't want to just hire somebody that's going to be a bomb thrower or somebody who's going to make things more adversarial that's necessary. I mean, sometimes it's important. There are cases where there's something called collaborative divorce, or through mediation, you need to know who you're dealing with on the other side. Like if there is you're dealing with an unreasonable, intractable individual on the other side, they're not going to be collaborative. They're not going to do anything that's going to help. And therefore, there are certain dynamics that I say do not ever go down that path. And therefore, you need to be going through where somebody's saying, okay, you don't want to do that? Then we're going to ask a judge to do it. If you don't want to do that, okay, we're going to set this schedule because you're not following that schedule. We're going to do this. Whatever it may be, that's the whole part of the boundaries. If somebody is the one who is just on a path of control and it's my way or the highway, you're going to need to have somebody higher or has more power to ensure that they are, they're no longer in that control mode anymore.
Yeah, you guys find the right lawyer for sure. And, I put in there too that sometimes things shift. So I had my first lawyer and we sat down, my ex and I drafted our own decree. Like literally we wrote how we're going to split everything out. And then we hired one lawyer
Yeah.
and split it, like very collaborative. And then everything changed, right? And then the new fiance showed up. And then all the agreements he had made, she literally was like, I didn't agree to them. I'm like, well,
Like she
this
was
is
an
fantastic.
intervening party. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. And so then that created we went back to mediation. I had to hire a different lawyer because the collaborative lawyer was not somebody who was ready to really hold them to the line.
Yeah.
And I see that happen all the time, and so you interview different lawyers, reach out and talk to different lawyers, see which one, do they talk to you in a way that feels supportive? Do you feel clear on what they're explaining? And ask good quality questions, recently talking with a friend, they're in the middle of, divorce was final. Then they mediated. That was final. Now they are back. And it has now been, I think, 2-3 years
Oh,
being drugged back through the court. And every time they think it's done, they literally sign an agreement and a new whatever shows up the next week. So that I was like, you need a different lawyer. I go, you
yeah.
need a
Yeah.
different lawyer. Your lawyer keeps telling you, well, your ex will eventually settle down. I go, this ex is not settling down. I go, and the lawyer will be like, oh, just, let's just put some like general language. And I was like, you need a new lawyer. And so don't be afraid in the process to decide as a business decision, I need somebody else fighting for me on the other side because there is the business and there is the emotions of divorce. And those two get muddled up. I too leaned on my lawyer thinking she was my therapist
No.
because she was in the weeds with me, right? Like, but you get it and you understand and you're
Right.
there with me. We all do it, but there are different people that need to be in your support system to help you through it. And it'll
No,
make
look,
a world of difference.
when you're discussing your friend who, they just something else pops up as soon as they it's like that game when the kids, you pop things in the other head pops up. Sometimes the lawyer has to be kind of strategic enough to understand the dynamic and to be able to ensure that there's not going to continue to be issues. I mean, there's always going to be issues that we have no idea is going to happen. But if you already know the dynamic, you have to ensure that it's not like loose language, it's actual hard language. Like this is the schedule, this is the default, right? You can resolve it and you can, mutually agree otherwise. But if you can't, this is how we go. And look, I think relationships sometimes with lawyers are similar to relationships with people. Sometimes they stagnate or people are sick of each other, or especially when you're in a contentious situation and you've been in it a long time, sometimes, divorce lawyers feel that it's very often that old cliche of like husband kicks wife, wife kicks kid, kid kicks dog, that we're like the matrimonial lawyers are in between. If you can't get your ex-spouse and they're fighting, sometimes you take it out on your lawyer, and it's just normal, right? In the sense of, you got to vent to somebody, and sometimes we become the person that they blame. So it's not uncommon, especially in very contentious matters, to have more than one lawyer. I just don't, it's not the goal, right? The goal is that from the very beginning, you and your lawyer should be aligned, and the lawyer should recognize fairly quickly who they're dealing with, both from the standpoint of who they're dealing with on the party on the other side, and sometimes their lawyer. When people ask me, how long and how much is this going to cost me? I so often have to say to them, I have no idea, because there is a multitude of different circumstances that can elongate and make things more expensive. Because sometimes one lawyer has, like, has a bad relationship with the other lawyer, or one lawyer doesn't like, decides to personalize it. And there are plenty of lawyers that do that, like against the other spouse. It's like they've taken on their client's everything, that which doesn't help the client per se, I will say. Or like the judge, something happened with the judge that, will also elongate. So very often we're like, I can't tell you, but I can tell you what the goal is or what the hope is. All of this to say is, while the road to divorce can be bumpy, if you are in that black and white, there is no, you have to get out, because it's really, could it be detrimental to your either physical or mental well-being or your children's? There is no question. And even if you've just decided we are no longer aligned and life is too short and I want to embrace a new chapter, while it may be bumpy, in my over 34 years, 35 years of doing this, usually the next chapter after, the initial pain and getting through the newness and all the things you talked about, all the different things that you are now going to be embarking upon, because sometimes your friends are going to dump you because they think divorce is catchy. Sometimes, you may be in a new home. You may have now had to start a job. Now all of a sudden you're on a budget where you never had a budget before. That new chapter will be better and will be brighter.
Yes, you just have to consciously choose how you want to build it. You're making a choice to restart, and it can be a beautiful opportunity to restart and get really clear. I started saying no, like, no, this doesn't really feel like what I want to do. No, I don't really want to go. Like, I don't want to drive 6 or 7 hours to get to my niece's birthday for one day and then turn around and drive back. And was that upsetting? Yes. And did I feel bad? Yes. And there were choices that I know how to make that I made differently. And how could I, in those situations, yeah, I'm disappointing family in some ways. How can we make up and rebuild the connection in different ways? You know, and with friends, if they're going to stay, or maybe they weren't moving forward with me in the next season. You get to choose. And I think that is the most powerful part. And that is also why people get so frozen in the fear, because all of a sudden you are about to make these changes that are going to rewrite everything that you've built so far, and it can be absolutely fantastic on the other side. If you're lucky, maybe you can also fix some of the relationship issues, but that's a bonus. That's not a guarantee as
Yeah.
you're moving through any of this. It's about how you want to operate. What do you want to take on or not take on? And how do you no longer allow those things of the past to continue to impact your future?
Well said. Well said.
Well, I loved having you on, Lois, because I love that you are such a fantastic blend of just understanding the emotions, the dynamics, the things people are going through. You had great advice for people, and you have this wealth of experience. Was there anything else you would say in your career? Are there some repeating patterns that set people up for success, or things that you've seen happen over and over again that would be helpful for our listeners to be aware of?
Well, I think one of the things, right, is that you made mention that divorce is a business transaction ultimately. I mean, it's layered with emotions and all sorts of, resentment and unrequited stuff. But ultimately, it's a business deal. So to try not to get mired in the emotion, and to at some point either have somebody else really help you with that, or to be able to look at it that way and look at it as a business transaction, that I think is kind of super important advice in the sense of when you're making deals, like very often, right? People, the one of the things people often will fight about is the marital residence. You talked about, like, it may be sold or not. And it's like, I necessarily need this apartment, or I need this home because this is where my kids grew up, or whatever. And that sometimes is not the most financially smart economic decisions that you should make. So to try to look at things from a business standpoint instead of being mired in the emotion. The idea of the revenge, right? You have to stop thinking about how to hurt the other side and how best to set myself up for success, both for my children's needs as well as for my financial needs, right? Look, the things that I see over and over again when people talk about, when somebody has cheated, number one, cheating is not just one person's fault. It's usually two because something was going on that was not good in the marriage itself. And that usually took two people. But the cheater very often cheats again. So this idea, that when new marriages and when people are like, oh, we had this relationship, he left his wife, he's going to be with me for an hour. Like, be aware. Cheaters usually cheat again. So, like, don't be surprised when they cheat on you too after you're the second wife or whatever. That may happen again. So, like, let's be real about that. I think the biggest mistake that is, after seeing it over and over again, is that no matter how much you may dislike or really find your spouse challenging or annoying, or you really even hate that person, do not tell your children that. Do not complain about them in front of your children. Don't tell your children how much you hate that, or how terrible, or that they broke up the marriage, because you know what? Your kids are half that other parent's DNA, and they're half of them. And it's basically you're kind of shitting on them at the same time when you're shitting on the other parent. And it's just hurtful. And no matter, every mental health professional will say it and do it. People do things in the heat of the moment. And I am not suggesting that we are not human, but the idea that you should complain to your children or in front of them is just not good. It's horrible for them. They carry that stuff forever and ever. So from that standpoint, and finally, like, if you're in a bad marriage, that idea that I should wait till the kids are like going to college and that's when I'm going to pull the plug or whatever, it actually is the opposite impact for your kids. Kids fare better when they've gone through the divorce younger than they are when all of a sudden their parents are getting divorced 18, 19, 20. In fact, it's crazy, but that's when they have the most difficulty. So I think those are some of the things I've seen or have advice about.
Yeah, isn't that so interesting? Because we think, oh, they'll be more adult. They'll be able to logically understand. And this is where you guys, the first wave of a divorce is not a logical decision. It is a grief and an emotion. And your kids, when they're older, have a lot more awareness of emotions versus when they're younger. They can be upset, but right, like it is what it is. And they kind of move through it. This becomes the new reality. This becomes the new normal. So definitely I have seen that. I have seen that as well. And I highly, highly back. Do not complain to your kids. Do not complain about your ex in front of your kids. Do not put your kids in the middle because they still do love that other parent. And so now they feel like they have to choose. And divorce is already emotionally taxing for them. Don't add more to it. I used to just reflect on the fact that I didn't want to be the one that impacted the relationship he had with his dad. His dad and I have a relationship, and the quality of that relationship is based on what we did. The quality of my son's relationship with his dad is based on what they do. And it was hard and it was, challenging, but I made that commitment and then I stuck to it. Like I didn't want to put my kid in the middle when he came back. How was
What'd
the
you do?
how
Right. I missed you so much. I was crying the entire time. Yeah. Yeah. No.
Yeah. Yeah, and so making some of those statements, on that one, it was like, I'd welcome my son back and I'd be like, "I hope you had a really great weekend." And if he wants to talk about it, he's gonna tell me about it, but not we ask these questions and they can energetically feel that we're trying to learn
No, no,
what's
no.
going on in the other house.
Children are incredibly intuitive and they're incredibly smart. And even when you have clients, or I've had clients where they're like, I didn't say anything, but they were on the phone, right? Screaming, yelling, or whatever. And they're in the other room. They heard every single, bit of that conversation. You just have to be careful because, again, as you're venting or you need to let it out, what you're doing is you're creating so much baggage for your kids, and it's just so incredibly hurtful to them and their psyche. So that to me is one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give to people.
I love that. I love ending on that note because it is such a powerful place. I started this podcast because I wanted my kid to have nicer kids on the playground because hurt people. And if kids are sad and upset, it's probably because of whatever's happening in their own home. And so we as adults need to own our own emotional healing and own what we're doing to cause more pain or hurt for other people in reaction to the pain we're having ourselves. So hopefully today's episode helped you take away a few key things to think over and process if you're contemplating divorce, or if you're looking at a situation where you are worried that your soon to be ex or ex is controlling a lot of the details. Have the right support system, right? Don't put the kids in the middle. Take care of yourself, prioritize yourself, and know that it is a season. It is not a lifetime. Your divorce will always be with you. You'll probably still have to co-parent with your ex, but the actual process of the divorce will eventually be over. Thank you, Lois, for joining me today. And until next week, you guys give yourself some grace, get some movement in, find something that takes care of you. And we'll be back next week with another episode. And that's it. Another great episode of the Crazy Ex-Wives Club, a podcast for women learning how to heal from their divorce. Tune in next week for more advice and tips to help you figure out life after divorce. And until then, give yourself grace, do the best you can, and know that this is all part of the process.